Hi guys, I wanted to take this opportunity to give you a video on how to do basically all of the Excel manipulations required to get your research paper results section done. So it's going to take about an hour, and you're going to stop and start this thing, so you could go ahead and run through it right from the beginning. I would minimize the screen and make the screen a little bit small on the right hand side and keep your Excel file on the left hand side that you could duplicate things as we go. But it's up to you how you run it. Right now I'm going to start to launch Excel. Excel is down on the bottom ribbon right here for me, and for you it is probably you're going to have to access it by clicking somewhere on the lower left hand corner. I have Windows version 10 on my home computer, so I have to do it this way, and I'm going to go and look for Excel. So it's in alphabetical order, D, E, there's Excel 2016. Similarly, I could have launched it just by using my bar down here. You can see my cursor moving back and forth. Excel up here, and then Excel down here. I'm just going to double click on the Excel below and bring up hopefully a blank or empty screen so I can choose my blank screen. Here it comes. And now I'm good. So this is the screen I usually get. You'll get something that looks a lot like it. You just double click on the blank workbook. If you're not already at full screen, for example, if you're at partial screen like this, you might want to get to full screen. If you want to go to partial screen to run my video side by side, then you're going to minimize a little bit, and you could change the shape of this, and you could also move it around. So you just grab onto it somewhere. You'll have to find out where exactly. No, I don't want to do that. I just want to find out where I can grab this and move it. Let's see. That's unusual. Oh, I made it big all right, but I didn't grab it and move it. I think what I'll do is make it slightly larger. That way I have a place to grab. See, I needed a place to grab. Glad this happened when you were here, so that way you can see how I fixed it. And then get the lower right hand corner and bring it back down, maybe bring it halfway, half the screen perhaps, and then you can run my video on the other half, if that's convenient for you. Like I said, you can do it any way you want. I'm going to blow the screen up because I'm not running my video, I'm recording it. So the first thing I want to do is what I did in class, which is hold the control key down, move the wheel on my mouse, or just across your mouse pad if you have a mouse pad, and then you will hit A1. This is where I like to put the titles, so I'm going to put in reaction distance in the title, and for partners, and maybe I'll make this a lowercase d, reaction distance for partners. I'm going to take that very same title. You can see it's up here in the F of X line. I'm going to highlight it, Control C for copy, and I'm going to put it down in sheet 1. I'm going to highlight it, and Control V as in Victor for paste. And so now the title is back down on the sheet. It's labeled accordingly. The next thing I want to do is go to cell B3. I go to B3 because I like to keep a row available and a column available, so that if I want to change my table in any way, shape, or form, I have a place to do that. I don't have to bother inserting rows or columns. It's easy enough to do, but I just choose to start this way in the beginning. The first set of data is going to be trial data, and I'm going to double click on the cell B3 and type in the word trial. If you hit the enter key, what will happen is the cursor will move down to the next line, because that's the default setting for Excel. You can change the default setting so when you hit the enter key it moves to the right, but right now it's set on going down. So I'm going to hit the right arrow, and that'll, sorry, hit both, the right arrow, and then it'll move to the right. So now I'm in cell C3, and I'm going to type in, let's say partner 1 for, I can't think of a better name right now, partner 1, and then right arrow, partner 2. And you will have two partners. You and your partner, you will have one partner. You and your partner will do the experiment. You'll have to create a hypothesis, and you're going to do that by reading the Kosinski paper, making a concept map, sitting down and with your partner going over the elements or the factors that influence reaction time one by one to see whether or not they're going to be operative in your experiment the day you do it. So I have the data, I have the labels here. Now I'm going to go down and number the trials. 1 down arrow, 2 down arrow. I've just created a series. Excel is really good about recognizing series. And I'm going to click my left mouse button into cell B4, and I'm going to hold the left mouse button down and drag it down to 2. And now you can see, as I mentioned in class, you have a line around both 1 and 2. So cell B4 and B5 has been highlighted for you. Excel will tell you where you put your cursor when you first started to create this array. And you can see it's light here in B4. So that's where I put my cursor when I started to create this array. I am going to go to the lower right hand corner where my white plus sign will change to a black plus sign. Hit my left mouse button down and drag it down 10 lines because I'm going to do 10 trials to begin with. You're going to do the experiment. This is going to be your practice run. So we should call this practice trials. Let's go up here into B3 and double click in front of the T and write practice trials. I did this once before, this graph. I'm just going to go find that graph and enter the trial data. You are going to enter your real data. So you don't have to enter my data, but if you wanted to do it right now to practice, that's fine. All you have to do is replace it with your real data. So I'm going to go back and get my file, open, and here it is, reaction distance data. I'm going to collect that, and this was the data. I actually changed the names, so let me copy the data and bring it back into the file we were working on. So here I actually changed the names to Punch and Judy, so let me right click and paste that all in. Let's see, paste values. Oh wow, where did we go for this? I have to hit my home button. I went to places I have no idea. Let's see, home button, and you see I'm on line 401,000. I don't know how that happened. I have to go up here. Now I'm back in business. Right click and paste. Yeah. Okay, so I changed the names partner 1 and partner 2 to Punch and Judy. You could change it to your partners once you know who they are. It doesn't much matter at this point, but I did want to put in some data, and I made up the data here. So I just have data that we can play with. If you want to go ahead and pause the video and enter the same data, that's fine. Or you can enter any other data that you want. Or if you have your trial data already, you can put that in. The next thing you're going to do is down at the bottom, you're going to, oh, we're not going to do anything with this because it's the practice trials. We're just going to create a graph. That's what we're going to do. We want to see what this graph will look like with practice data, and we want to draw a conclusion as to whether or not we've performed enough trials so that the variation that we see in the reaction distance, that is what's recorded here, the variation that we see in reaction distance is actually coming together and becoming less variable with increasing trials. So we want to take a look at that. The best way to do that is to create a graph. So let's start with C4. Put your cursor into C4, hit the left mouse button and hold it down, and go all the way down to the last value, which is C13. Now you might not have you might not have any zeros after the decimal or any digit after the decimal. If you don't, then what you'll want to do is highlight all of the data and right click and say Format Cells. You'll come up with a dialog box. Go to Number. You'll hit on Number. It might be on General right now. You'll hit on Number and you'll say highlight and hit say 1 digit after the decimal. And say OK, and then your numbers will look like this. So getting back to where I was, we're going to highlight from 12 down to 11, and we're going to say Insert. I want a a scatter plot. So that's the symbol for a scatter plot right here. It looks like dots on the graph. And I'm going to say OK, and or click OK, go down arrow, and that's the one I want to select. Now, mine came up with a chart title. Yours may not, because it depends on how your default is set. I'm going to pull back a little bit so you can see this better. If you didn't have it, don't worry about it. I'll erase it and put it back. Let's say it doesn't have one. So what I want to do is make sure that the chart is selected. The way you know it's selected is by looking at these dots or circles that are around the chart. If you have circles, it's selected. If I click off of the chart, then you don't see those circles anymore. If I click on the chart, but I click on an element of the chart, then I have more than just these circles selected. I actually have the grid lines selected as well. You don't want that. So just go back off of the grid lines, up in the upper right-hand corner, and just click on it. And you'll see now you just have the chart. The first thing we would like to do is we want to, once you select the chart, you'll have chart tools displayed up at the top here. And depending on the version of Excel that you have, 2013 is a little different than 2016. You might have to look a little bit to find out where your chart elements are. And the chart elements are things like your X and Y axis titles, your chart title, your X and Y axis labels. So you'll see it. It'll appear as I move my cursor from design all the way over to the left. It says add chart elements. So I'll click on that, and the first one I want, remember I took out the chart title, I want to put that back. Chart title, it says none, but I want to go above the chart, click on that. And for this one, the chart title, it's actually the same as this reaction distance for partners down here, which I remember I got from A1. So I'm just going to go back to A1. It'll come out in f of x. I will highlight it, Control-C for copy. And then I will go back to chart title. I'll highlight the chart title, Control-V for paste. I will click on the dotted line that's around the chart title to make it a solid line. And then I want to change some things. The first thing I want to change is the size. I'm already at the Home tab. I want to go to 14 point type and raise it up to 16. I see that the title looks a little gray to me. So I want to change the color by going to the Format Color and select black. Now it's darker. I like that. And then we're also going to make it bold. So now we have a proper title. The next thing we'd like to do is add another element. This time we're going to add the Y-axis title. I don't want to be selecting the chart title, so I'm going to click in the upper right-hand corner again. That will take the chart title off. It'll deselect the chart title, but it will keep the graph selected. So that way I have my chart tools up here. I'll go back to design. I'll add chart elements. This time I'm trying the axis titles. I want to start with, let's start with the vertical one. The vertical selection for me automatically rotates the vertical or Y axis. If it didn't for you, then you would have to go to more axis title options and then pick the rotated vertical axis. Mine is already selected. I'm just going to click on it. I'm going to highlight the axis. And these values from 0 to 16 are reaction distances. So I'm just going to say reaction distance, and in parentheses it's going to be in inches, close paren. I have a dotted line around the Y-axis title. I want to click on that line and make it a solid line so I can go and change things. I'm going to go to Home. I want to change it from 10 points to, this is 16. You'll remember in class I told you we're going to go down to 14 for the axis titles, and we want to change the color from that gray, which is default color, to a black. The next thing I might as well do is, while I'm here, I'm going to look at the Y-axis labels. These are labels. So remember, we have a chart title, we have a Y-axis title, we have a Y-axis label. Now these labels provide too much information for me. I don't need to have the the decimal point and a 0 after it. So I'm going to double click on that. It comes out with a display, and I'm going to say the major units ought to be 2, which is fine, 2. The minor units, we could put that as 1 if we wanted to. It says display units, show display units on the chart. It's not going to allow me to select that. I'm just going to move down to number, which is where I wanted to go to begin with. I have to move this bar down so I can see the number of decimal places, and I want to replace that with a 0. 0, and then hit enter. And the next thing I want to do is change this. I got rid of the decimal, so now what I want to do is change it. I want to go to home and change it to 12 points, and also make it black. 12 points black. So this should be 14 points. When I click on the y-axis title, it should say 14, and it does. You can see it up here. When I click on the x-axis labels, it should say 12, and it does. When I click on the x-axis labels, here I'd like to have the numbers 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, all the way through to 10. So I'm going to try to make that happen. I want to see the graph, excuse me, and I'm going to look for an option here that's going to allow me to do that. So I'll just click on the first one. It says a fill and a line. It allows me to put lines and fills. I don't want to fill or line this entire axis label, so that's not a good option for me. I'll try the next one. This says shadow, glow, soft edges in 3D. Not a good option. The next one is vertical alignment. Not necessarily good for me. The last one, of course, it's always the last one. You're going to try axis options. And for the axis options, we were here before. We are looking to change the units from 2 to 1. So we're going to go to 1. And the number's already selected as 0 digits after the decimal. Let's just confirm that. We'll go to number. And does it have any? It is general. Let's go to number again and make sure it says 0. And that'll do it. And we'll click off of it. And now we're in business. This is what we wanted. So let's take a look at the graph for a second. The first thing I notice is that we have color in the graph, and I don't want color because most publications, they charge you to reproduce figures in color. So otherwise it's free. So we're going to take color out of everything. I'm going to right click on this. Any one of these data points I'll right click on. So I'll try to take it here and say Format Data Series. On the Format Data Series line, I'll look for that marker. It says line and marker. I'm going to look for the marker selection, and then I want to fill the marker, solid fill, with white. I'm going to go to color and make it white. The border, however, I want solid, and I want to fill it black. Let me go down here, fill it with black. And there's my marker. I'm going to click off the graph for a moment. There's my marker, and I could see them clearly. I really need a key for this. A key is another element of some graphs, and I need a key to tell me that this is Punch's data. So I'm going to click on the graph again, go back up to Chart Tools, Design, look for my chart elements, and come down and look for Legend. You'll see the legend says it's off. I want to put the legend to the right. And now it says Series 1. I'm going to click on that and just move it up a bit. And I really want it to say something other than Series 1. I want it to say Punch. So I'm going to click on the upper right hand corner. It will deselect the Series 1. I'm going to right click it. That didn't give me what I wanted. I'm going to right click it again. There you go. Right click it again. And this time I'm going to do Select Data. Select Data. So I want to select the data. I have this dialog box up here, and you notice it says Series 1. I want to edit that. Edit. And it says, what is the series name that you want? My cursor is now flashing in this box, so all I need to do is go over to Punch and hit that. And X series values, we want the series values, of course, to be on the x-axis. It's going to be 1 to 10. So we're moving this over and going 1 to 10. Now it looks like Excel decided to give me up to 11, which is okay. It's a balanced graph. I'm just gonna click back on here in the right-hand corner and make sure I have the right y-axis values, and I do. You can see them highlighted. The little group of ants that are running around here suggest that this is what we've selected. So I'm going to go back and say OK. One more OK. And now let's take a look at the graph. I'm going to pull back a little bit. I'll close out the format chart area. And now I have everything that I wanted on the graph so far. I may not have wanted this going to 11. I could double click on this and get it to go to 10 by saying maximum 10. So I'm looking at axis options. The axis options maximum 10. So now I click on that. If I click off, get rid of this to the right so I can see the graph, and now you can see it goes from 0 to 10. You might ask, well, why didn't I go from 1 to 10? And I could have done that, but 0 is such a common number, everybody understands it. We do need to change some things down here, though. We have no trial axis label, and we also have this the wrong size. So let's go down to the x-axis. We're going to double click on it, and we're going to go to, let's see, what are we going to go to? Oh, I think I made a mistake here. Let's click off of it. Let's just click again onto the axis label, and this time let's go to Home tab. We're going to go to the font size and make it 12, and then we're going to change this to black. And I think now if we click off, we'll see what we got. Yeah, that looks good. I guess the last thing now is to put the word trial down below. And what is that called again? That's called an x-axis title. So we're going to click on the graph. We have chart tools that came up. We'll go to design. We'll go get the chart element. And again, it is an axis title. It's on the horizontal axis, so we're going to click on horizontal. Well, you see the title, axis title came up, so I'm just going to click on that. I want to highlight it and replace axis title with trials. Trials. And you can see it's got a dotted line around it, and I want to just click on that dotted line and make it solid, so that way I can go back up to Home. I can go to font size 12 and click on this font color and make that gray a true black. Okay, so we're almost there. So now we have a nice looking graph. The only thing we have left to do, before I complicate this by adding the other set of data, let's see what the value of the graph is. It appears as though when we first started the trials, there was a lot of separation between the data in successive trials. Here you can see it started at 12, went down to 6, it bounced up to 13, it went down to 8, it went up to 15, and then it went down to 10, and now things seem to be starting to stable out. They're stabilizing. So here you can see the 10, 12, it went to 11, it went back down again to 12.5, and then back down again to 11. So what we could say about this is that with increasing practice, the variation seems to lessen. And that's what we want to do. We want to make the variation as small as possible. So you need to do a number of trials where you start to see the variation growing to a minimum. And once you've done that, then you know you've practiced enough, and then you can go ahead and test your hypothesis between you and your partner. Now, you might require fewer trials than your partner, but in any case, you're going to run this. You're going to run out the trials and keep this graph going, and get as many trial data as you need in order to draw the conclusion that yes, the variation is a minimum. We're going to add now the next set of data for Judy. I'm already selected the graph, you could see that, but I also have this selected as well, the y-axis title. So let's click on it again. That'll deselect the y-axis title. It'll allow me to right-click again, I'll go to a different part of the graph and right-click again and say Select Data. This time, I want to add Judy. So I have Punch already, I want to add Judy. So I add, it says Edit the Data Series. The first thing, my cursor is flashing in series name, which is perfect. I want to add Judy's name. The next thing is the X values. It will default to this because I already have it. So I'm just going to now put in the Y series value. So what I want to do is whatever was in there, I want to delete. And I want to replace it with 15 to down to the last 15. And then say OK and OK. So now you see I have Judy's data in there as well. And she too had a little bit of variation. You can see the number here is 15 and then it went down to 11. So from 15 to 11 is quite a bit of variation. And then it kind of stabilized out where it didn't change much in the last 4 measurements or even 5 measurements. So, or even 6 measurements. So she kind of plateaued early, which is great. Then we're going to go on any one of these dots, and because they are color, we're going to right-click on the dot, and we're going to change the format. So Format Data Series. Again, we have to look for the marker. So we're going to, I remember from last time that it was the columns, so I'm going to click on the columns. Well, it was the columns anyway. Series options. Let's try again. Okay, there it is. It was on the bucket. Marker. And now we're going to pick black for the fill and black for the border. And then we'll click off the graph. And let's see what we have. We'll get rid of this dialog box. And we do have Punch and we do have Judy. So they're in the key. So we're good to go. This is the first graph that I'd like you to put in your results section. And from it, you're going to draw a conclusion that basically will say we ran a series of trials. We ran enough trials so that both partners had stable reaction distances, and then once that was achieved, then you were able to go ahead and test your hypothesis by running another 10 trials. So this could be 10 or more, but the next one will be 10 trials. So let's start by creating that data set, and we're going to move now from this first graph to the second graph. So I'm going to go to a different sheet, and here's the sheet down here. I'm going to enter a new sheet and back up to A1. So this time we're going to call this reaction distance for hypothesis testing. Now keep in mind we're not doing one thing. We're not going to convert automatically to reaction time. We will ultimately do that, but not at this point. So we're just going to do the reaction distance first. And we're going to start out by creating the table. So here again is the number of trials, and we're going to put it into B3. So trials. We have, let's call them Punch and Judy for lack of a better name. Punch and Judy. Punch and Judy was a cartoon years ago, by the way. So we're going to put 1 and 2, 1, down arrow, 2, right underneath trials. We'll select 1 and 2, as we did before, and we're going to grab the little box with our cursor. It goes from a white plus sign to a black plus sign, and hold the left mouse button down as we drag down for the 10 trials and let go. And now we're going to capture real data. So let's argue that I'm going to make up the data. I mean, you're not going to make it up. You're going to actually do the experiment. But in the interest of time, I don't want to do the experiment with myself. So I'm going to say, I'm going to put in numbers that I think, make sense. 16, 17, 12. You notice they're all in the teens. So that's one thing. 13 and 11. And then I'm going to give another one here, and this time I'm going to put a few of them higher up. Not all of them, but just a few. And And let's try 16. Okay. So now these are the data that were collected in your experiment, and we need to calculate means and standard deviations. You recall that means are a measure of central tendency. That means that's where the data seems to be going. That's kind of like a representation of what the real reaction time is, or reaction distance is, for that particular partner, because all the numbers seem to be going in that direction. So we're going to calculate that. You would calculate it by hand. You would just sum up all these values and divide it by the total number of values, as you well know. But Excel allows you to do it more easily than that. It just uses this f of x function. So we're going to go up here and we're going to hit the f of x function. It's going to come up with a dialog box like this. And you notice that it has two parts. One is search for a function, and the other one is select a function. So we're going to highlight the search for a function. In this case, it's already highlighted. So we could just go ahead and type. And we're going to type the word average, and then say go. This has recommended functions. And the first one says return the average, which is an arithmetic mean. And that's exactly what we want. So we're going to say OK. Now, Excel is kind of funny in this way. It uses this designation number 1 to mean a series of numbers. So I like the word array better, and sometimes it does use array, but in this case it uses number 1, and I'm not exactly sure why. But we have to just know what it is. Now what we'll do is highlight from the first value, or the first trial of punch, by holding the left mouse button down and pressing down on the 12, all the way down to the 10th value and letting go. And you'll see it says C4 to C13. Well, this is C, this is 4 right here, and it goes all the way down to 13. So we've selected C4 to C13, which is what we wanted. Here's the mean, it's 14.3. I'll say OK, and it came up with 14.3. The next thing we want to do is calculate the standard deviation. We'll abbreviate that SD. And you remember from class, I may have mentioned to you that standard deviation and means are parameters. Parameters are a characteristic of a collection of numbers. So the mean is one type of parameter, and it's called a measure of central tendency. It means where do all the data seem to be grouping? Where do they want to go to represent the characteristic of those numbers? And the standard deviation is a little bit different concept. It says, we understand where the mean is, but what about the individual values that make up the mean? How far away from the mean were each of those values? So it is really a deviation from the mean, and it kind of sums all of the deviations from the mean. But if you were to sum the deviations from the mean, you would wind up with a value 0, and you can't have that. So what they do is they square the deviations from the mean, and then they sum them up. So they square each one and then sum them up, and then they take the square root. And actually they divide it by the total number of samples, and that gives them the standard deviation. So what I'm going to do is use the function to calculate it, so f of x, and I'm going to type in, remember it's highlighted up here, so I can type in standard deviation. And then I can hit go, and the first one that comes up is stdev. And it says this forget about this line. The second line says estimates standard deviation based on a sample. So that's what we want, standard deviation based on a sample. And we'll say OK. And you'll see it's selecting C4 to C14. Why? Because Excel will take anything that's a number and put it in there. Anything that goes up and is a number, it'll put it in there. But it's going to calculate in the standard deviation the mean value, and we don't want that. So what we want to do is either reselect from 12 to 11, or we can go right here and highlight the 14, or even highlight the 4 and make it a 3. And once we do that, we have C4 to C13, which is where we wanted to be, and we can say OK. And this is the standard deviation, it's 2.668749. Way too many digits after the decimal. We'll change that. For right now, we're going to select both mean and standard deviation, go to the lower right-hand corner, make the white plus sign a cross, and left mouse button down and move it to the right. And now the means and standard deviations for the next set of data are already calculated. The last thing we want to calculate is we want to know whether or not these mean values are different from one another. So are they significantly different from one another? To do that, we have to apply a statistical test, and you know from class that that is called a t-test. And the t-test returns a value which we call a p-value, p-value. And the p-value is a number that ranges between 0 and 1. It cannot be higher than 1, nor can it be lower than 0. It is really a probability between 0 and 100%. It's just a decimal representation of that number. So the rule for drawing a conclusion as to whether or not means are different from one another is when a t-test is applied and the p-value returned is less than 0.05. Not 0.5, but 0.05. So if we get a value that is less than 0.05, that's our p-value from the t-test, then we know that the means are significantly different from one another. You cannot tell by looking alone. You have to actually perform the statistical test. So let's try to do that now. We're going to type in this box t-test space p-value. Now one thing you'll notice is that the text here went over the column line, and Excel has a nice way of fixing that. We could just take our cursor and move it up to the top of the column. You'll see now we have a down arrow, and we could just double click on it, get the down arrow and double click on it, and it automatically will fill the text into the column size. So it moves the column size so that the text can be accommodated. The next thing we need to do is we're going to calculate a p-value. It's just one number, so it can't go in the first cell, and it can't go in the second cell. It might as well go in both cells, and we have to then join both cells because that tells us that it's comparing this 14.3 to the 19. So let's use our cursor and select C16 and move it over to D16, and then let go, and you'll see that it is selected. We have a couple of ways of merging these cells. The simplest way is to look for Merge in Center right here at the top in the Home tab. Merge in Center, just click on it, and now you can see if I click off, this is actually merged. Center part comes in when you click back on and double click, and you'll see the cursor is right in the center. I'm going to f of x, and I'm going to look for a t-test. I know it's down here, but these are recently used values and you might not have it, so I'm just going to type it back up here. T-T-E-S-T, hit go, and it returns everything that can do a t-test. In this case, there's only one. Sometimes there's two. There's a t-test. Don't use that one. Use t-test, and say OK. And now, instead of saying number 1, number 2, it says array 1, which I like a whole lot better. So we're going to use array 1. You notice the cursor is already flashing in there, so I don't need to go in and select this box. I can just go right over to the number 12. Hold the left mouse button down, drag it all the way down to the number 11, which is the 10th value. Let go, and then come back, and now I want array 2. So it's flashing in array 1. I have to definitely click onto array 2 with my left mouse button to have it flashing there. And now I can go and collect that set of data all the way down to the last value. Don't include the 19. That's the mean. You don't want to include that. And this part is a bit of a struggle for you right now, but telling you that the answer to this question, or what number should I pick, is coming from your teacher, and that's what you're going to tell people should they ask. You're going to say, well, my teacher told me I should use tails 2 and type 2. Now, I'm not going to leave you in the lurch. I am going to tell you what tails and type are, but it's a little premature at this point to do so. As we use the test more and more, you'll become more familiar with tails and type, and I'll be able to show you illustrations where tails change and type changes. So for now, it's 2 and 2, and we'll say OK. Notice how many decimals there are here. That's way too many. It is customary to represent the p-value with four digits after the decimal. So I can change this a number of ways. I can right-click on it and go to Format Cells, Number, and change this to 4. Or, I'm going to cancel this, I can go on Home and look for these symbols. One symbol has got a 0 with an arrow on it, and it looks like there are more zeros below it. So this is if I wanted to get more decimal places, and the one to the right of that goes from a lot of decimal places to a fewer decimal places. If I click on this, I'm losing decimal places. and I'm going to click on it so many times so that I get 4 digits after the decimal. 0.0022. So the question now becomes, are these means significantly different from one another? You know what the decision rule is. If the p-value is less than 0.05, therefore the means are significantly different from one another. So you tell me, is the p-value less than 0.05? And you should be able to tell me yes, it is, because 0.05 is larger than 0.0022. So if it is less than 0.05, the means are actually different. So now what we want to do is clean up this table a little bit. We're going to start by putting our cursor up in trials. Hold the left mouse button down. Go all the way down to the bottom. We're going to right click. We're going to go Format Cells. And let's start by aligning everything in Tab Alignment. And we want to align the horizontal so everything is centered, and the vertical so everything is centered. And then say OK. No, let's not say OK. Let's go one more step. Let's go to Border and create a border. Notice that the border that's selected in Style is this one down here. It's the first straight line. It's the thinnest straight line, but it's still a straight line. If I click on Outline and Inside, this little representation, this box, shows me what I get when I look at the big table. So I'm going to say OK. And I'm going to click off of the table so I can actually see the lines. And here you can see all the lines are around in the table, which is starting to look pretty good. The next thing we want to do is we want to take the mean and standard deviation and just represent this data with 1 decimal point. So if we click on the first box, the first mean for Punch, and go down to the standard deviation for Judy, and let go, we've selected everything. And now we can go up here where it says Home. We can go to these little decimal point movers, and we can move them so that there's 1 decimal. So let's try clicking on 1 and clicking 1, go to the right, click on 1 again, and now we have 1 decimal. So we could have done this another way. We could say right click, Format Cells, Number, go to Number and say 1 decimal and say OK. It's another way to do it. If you had a value, let's say you had a value of 18.5 inches here, well then the table would look awkward. So if you had 18.5 here, then what you'd want to do is take all these values and express it as 1 digit after the decimal. Highlight, you can go up here and do it, or you can do right click, Format Cells, Number, Decimal. So I'm going to use this up here. That gave me 2 digits. I'm going to go back to 1, and now I have 1 for everything. So that makes this 18.5 not look so funny. Now I have a table. What do we need to do next? Well, we know that the reaction distances are significantly different, but what does the graph look like? And for that, we need to do a bar graph. So let's start by highlighting the mean values. Click on 14.3 and drag your cursor down while holding the left mouse button down to the next value, 19.1. Go up and say Insert. Look for the bar graph. This is the bar graph. It's an insert column or bar chart. So we're going to click on that. It gives me options. We're going to go to the first option. Click on that. And now we see we have this. If your chart title is not showing, I'm just going to deselect this and delete it. If it's not showing like this, we can get it back, so don't worry about it. The first thing I want to do is, I don't like the bars this color, and I don't like them this thick. I like them thicker than this. I want them to occupy more of the space. So I'm going to click on any one of the bars and right click and say Format Data Series. This comes up with some options, some series options, and you can click around to make sure you got the right one. So you click on the right one. And you want to change this to 50%. I'm going to explain to you what that means as we hit Enter. It says, make the space between the 2 graphs the same distance as half of one of the other columns. So either column, take half of that, and that's the space that you want to separate the 2 columns by. That's half the distance of one column. That's the space you want to separate the 2 columns by. So I hope you understand that. we're going to now go to fill option. And we want a solid fill, but I don't want black, I want white. I don't want to print in black because it's just a waste of ink. I also want a border around it and make sure that my solid border is black. And then I can click off and make sure that I like it. Yep, it looks good to me. There's some things that really have to be done to this. We need a 16-point title at the top in bold. We need a 14-point y-axis title and an x-axis title, which are missing right now. So let's go put those things in right now. We're going to click on the chart. We're going to come up with chart tools. You might have to go to format or some other, depending on your version, but you'll find it, and you'll find where it says chart elements, or it might just say directly add axis title or chart title. So remember, I clicked off chart title so that it would be missing, so it says none, but now I want to put it above the chart. And what I want for a title here is what we did before. Click on the reaction distance for hypothesis testing, go up where f of x is, highlight the whole thing and say Control C for copy, come back to chart title, highlight everything and do Control V for paste. So V as in Victor for paste, Control V. And now let's change this so that it's not light gray, it's rather black. So I'm selecting the entire box, going to the Home tab, making sure that black is the font color, and I select it for black. I also want to make this 16 points, you recall, and I wanted to make it bold. So there's my title, which looks good. I want to deselect the title, so I'm just going to click in the upper right hand corner. I'm not going to deselect the graph because I still need chart tools. So I go back up to chart tools, I find design again. This time I want to add my axis titles. Axis title will do the primary horizontal first. We'll highlight it, and this is going to be partners. Partners, that's who this is. It's partners. There's 1 and 2. We have partners, Punch and Judy. So we'll change it to Punch and Judy in just a minute, but the title is partners. We'll click on the dotted line so that it is solid line. So now we've selected this y-axis, x-axis title, and we'll go to Home. Make sure it is not 16-point bold, but unbolded and 14 points. 14 points. Make sure it's not gray, but rather black. Black. So here you can see 14-point black. We're done. Let's also click on this 1 and 2, and when we do that, we want to make this 12 points. I know we want to change it to Punch and Judy, but right now we just want to change the size and the color, so we don't have to do it later. And we'll do the same thing for the y-axis label. For the y-axis labels, notice I said this is a x-axis title, these are x-axis labels, these are y-axis labels, and we have no y-axis title yet, so I have to put that in. But for right now, we're going to click on the y-axis labels and go back up and make it 12 points, and also darken it up by making it black. And you'll notice that it has a decimal, and we don't like that. So we want to get rid of the decimal. It's too much information here. So I'm going to double click on it. This format axis box came up, and I'm going to look for a place where it's going to say number. It doesn't say number here at all. So I'm going to go to the next one. There's number. I'm going to click on number, and I'm going to take this decimal place and make it 0. And then click off of it, and now it became 0. I'll go back and click on the graph. This time I'm going to look for Chart Tools, Design. I'm going to go back to add the chart element, but only this time I want to add the y-axis title. So here's axis titles. Go to the primary vertical. It automatically flips it and rotates it for me, which is what I like. You can go to more axis title options if yours is not showing that. So, and then you can select primary vertical axis and rotate it. I'm going to select the text and put in what this is, which is the bars actually represent the average reaction distance, and it's in inches. So I included the word average here. It's the average reaction distance in inches. I'm going to click on it. I want to go back to the home, make it 14 points, make it black, and there it is. And it looks a little odd that it's much bigger. So we can actually change that just by grabbing the middle circle on the graph. So let's click off, so we deselect this part. Let's click on the graph again, and now we can go to that middle circle and just left mouse button and drag it down. And you can make the bars taller. That makes this reaction distance in inches fit perfectly. And you can center it by just moving it around. And now I think we have a graph that is looking more like the one that we want. But we did want to get rid of 1 and 2, and we wanted to put in Punch and Judy. So let's see how to do that. We'll click on the graph again. We'll go back, right-click, and say Select Data. So if we select Data, we have a series here, but more importantly, we have this edited. And we could, it's 1 and 2, we want to change that. So let's click on Edit, and the Yaxis label range goes from Punch to Judy. So we'll left mouse button on Punch, move over to the right, holding the left mouse button down to Judy, and then let go. It'll say Punch and Judy. We'll say OK. And we'll say OK again, and there's Punch and Judy. So we're in business now. There is one thing missing, however, and that is the standard deviation. We need the standard deviation in here. So we are going to, again, go to our Chart Tools Design, add Chart Element, and look for error bars. This is the most complicated part. The error bars option for Excel is a little bit weird, so it requires just an understanding of what you need to do. So you're going to go down to More Error Bar Options. And when you do that, we have to find, over on the right side, we have to find how to get caps and direction on these error bars. You see the error bars, they default to a certain value. So we're going to just punch up a couple of different things and see what they say. Here's one that's shadow, glow, and soft edges. That's not going to work. Error bar options, that seems like it'll work, and yes, it does. It has the plus. We only want it to go plus. We only want it to go up. And we want it to have a cap, and it does have a little bit of cap on it. But it isn't a fixed value. That doesn't mean anything to us, having a fixed value standard deviation. We want to put in the standard deviation, so we must go to Custom. We click on Custom and specify value. And now we have a positive error value and a negative error value. You notice we selected plus, so the negative shouldn't matter. Unfortunately, it does. So we're going to have to put both of these standard deviation values in this positive error value box as well as in the negative error value box. So let's start by highlighting this, going over to the standard deviation 2.7, left mouse button down, move it over 1 to 3.2, and let's do the same thing for the negative error value. Highlight it, go over to 2.7, left mouse button down, and drag the cursor over to 3.2 while the left mouse button is down, and let go, and then say OK. Oh, it said we had an error. Let's see what it was. Oh, sure. You see this said equal bracket brace 1 end brace. Yeah, we don't want that. We want to take that out. Just delete it, but not the equal sign. And then say OK. And there you go. Now we're in business. So let's make sure that it's right. We have to do a little double check by eye. If we add 14.3 and 2.7, what do we get? We get 7 and 3 is 10, carry the 1, 4 and 2 is 6, and carried 1 is 7, so it's 17. So this number, this error bar should be at 17, and it looks like it is. 15 and 20, it's not quite halfway, so it's probably 17. The 19.1 and 13.2 when added together gives us 22.3. So should be above 20, and it is. And 22.3 is almost 22.5 right in the middle, and that's pretty close, and that's where it is. So we know we have the graph right. This is the second graph that I want you to include in your data. I have one other thing to show you, and that is sometimes it's very helpful. You're going to report the p-value, by the way, 0.0020. You're going to report that in your paper, your second sentence of your results. But sometimes it's helpful, especially if you have more than 2 bars. It's helpful to designate it in the graph somehow. And authors use various things. Some use letters that they put here, and then they put it in a footnote down below the graph. Or what I've done in the past and I kind of like this myself, is I would just take the graph, I would right-click and copy it. And then I would open up Excel. I would open up PowerPoint. So I take PowerPoint. Let me find PowerPoint for you. Oh, I could have found it down here. No, it's not down there. I have to look under P for PowerPoint. HIJKLMNOP. PowerPoint. Click on that. It's coming up. I would use a blank presentation, and I would first of all, I want it designed so that the slide size is standard 4:3. I'll take anything on this slide and delete it. I could do it by just capturing it and hitting the delete button, or I can go to this slide and right-click and say layout blank, and it'll do the same thing. Then I'm going to right-click and paste picture. There's my picture, and I'm going to blow it up a little bit. And here I can put a line. A line, wherever there is a significant difference, a line can be found over the standard deviation bar representing the columns that are being compared. In this case, there are only two. So I'm going to draw, I'm going to insert a shape. The shape will be a line, and I'm going to start from one and move over to the center of the other, make it a straight line as close as I can get to the center. I'll right-click on the line, format the shape, make it thicker. I'd like to make it 3 points, and make it black. And now I can move this line directly up. And whenever you see a line covering the two bars, you know they're statistically significantly different. And you're going to have to save that in your paragraph anyway because you have to put the value in. But it's a quick check to see, oh yeah, look, there's a significant difference right away. And to keep this and put it into your paper, your research paper, you're going to have to click on this line and then hold the Control key down and click on the graph. And then you want to do a Control C for copy. And I'm going to insert a new slide. And then I'm going to right-click. This time I'm going to right-click. I want to right-click Picture. Because it's going to carry the line with me. And now I can resize this picture any size I like, and put it anywhere I like in my paper. So I think that's a wrap for now, guys. If you can get that much done, this is what I'm just going to highlight for you what I'm looking for. I'm looking for you to do first the reaction distance for partners. I want to see this graph in your paper, and I want to see a statement that says, yes, we've reached a point of minimal variation for both partners, and it should be apparent where that takes place in the graph. And then you're going to have your test of hypothesis, and I should really label this, by the way. I guess I didn't go that far. I'll just copy this, Control C, and take the sheet and label this with a Control V. Highlight, Control V. Oh, it didn't work. Let's try it again. Control C, and then highlight this. Highlight this, and do Control V. Not sure why that's not working. Control C one more time. Control V. No. Alright, well then I'm going to write it in. Reaction distance. Reaction distance for testing hypothesis. Oh, it only allows so many characters, so I'm going to leave reaction distance for testing. And that will be enough. At least I can know what's in these folders or spreadsheets. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. And like I said, when you're going to create your own graphs, if you need this as assistance, sometimes it's helpful to display the screencast in one side of your screen and do the work on the other side so you can pause it every time you need to and figure out exactly what you need to do. So I hope that helps. Let's see if I know how to get out of this.